Hey, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us on the Chill Like a Mother podcast today. For anybody who's new to listening, we're going to try to keep this episode to 20, 25 minutes because we all know that you guys got stuff to do. And you're likely doing this while you're listening, while you're doing your laundry or you're on your commute or something like that. And we know that that's like the magic window for busy moms. So we are here with Kellie Forsyth, and we are going to talk about the real reason, the real narrative, the real story behind why we are all so friggin' overwhelmed and burnt out, and why we don't have more than 20 minutes to listen to a podcast. So, welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So, tell me, what's the real reason? Why are we all so overwhelmed?
Yeah, let's jump right into it. So I love that you even point out like why we only have 20 minutes to sit down, or maybe you're folding laundry or whatever you're doing to listen to a podcast. And from what I see with the clients I'm working with, it's the amount of time we have, right? We have so many priorities, so many things, so many people we want to help and be there for. And we're not great at the skill. We don't go to motherhood school where we learn how to also put ourselves first and how to actually carve out time to feel the overwhelm, to feel emotion, to see where are they coming from, and to show up for ourselves while also showing up for everybody else. It doesn't need to be either or.
Oh, so true. And I just want to like name that if anybody is in the like tornado cycle of overwhelm, what we're about to talk about today is like doing some of the things some of the time, because I think when we can get into this narrative of, I must listen to this podcast and I must follow the script by Dr. Becky on Instagram, which I do, by the way, they're amazing. However, I think if we are in like the depths of overwhelm, I just want to name that some of the things that you listen to or that you hear or you consume may not work all of the time. And to like really meet yourself with some grace and some compassion if you are in that place right now and are about to listen to two women who work with women, giving them the tools for that. So I just wanted to name that.
I love that so much. And what the work I do, I'm a life coach and I work with moms specifically on productivity. And just one thought that I want to add there that I work a lot with women on is this word consistency that's been used in the self-help world that I mean, being consistent in things is amazing, but it's not necessary. So I just love that you point out we don't need to be doing all the things all the time. Our lives are not like a formula that we have to have everything perfect all the time. If we're trying a little bit better each day and then we are able to give ourselves some grace when we totally mess up, when we maybe, yell at our kids or we snap, that's where we really see progress. It's not when we're doing all the things prescribed or, following everyone's advice, but really saying, okay, today, how can I, like, what's the thing going to be today? And it doesn't need to be the exact same thing every single day or week, day in, day out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, what are the things that get in the way of us? I'm going to put myself in that category of us being able to really get more than 20 minutes, to listen to a podcast or to, the most quiet moment could be the quiet moment you have in the car. And so, what are the things getting in the way of that?
Yeah, I think the first most important thing is planning. Planning is not a sexy topic. It's not something that we're like, oh, I just want to learn how to plan better. But when we really get down to it, if we're able to plan better, we can have more time. We need to prioritize ourselves when we plan. For example, if you go to my calendar right now, you're going to see when my sons have basketball, when, another son has his piano lessons, when school drop off is, everything is planned out for my kids. Am I on my schedule as well? Are you on your schedule as well? And I'm not saying we need to block off hours for ourselves or do all this self-care. That's not really necessary. More intention that you bring to any moment you have, the time isn't as important as the intention you're bringing to something. So just like you schedule things for your kids, maybe you pay for summer camp, or whatever it is, are you giving yourself the mom the summer camp, right? Are you working with someone that's helping you to, your work, Kayla, is so amazing, helping moms really process emotion and be creative and step into their best version of them. And we do that for our kids all the time, but
All the
where are
time.
we doing it for ourselves? Right. And
Mhm.
whether that's big, like working with someone, or whether it's small in your daily routines and rituals, that's where we can really show up and create more time. And if we don't have the hours on the clock to add, how can we add more intention to the time we do have?
Mm, mhm, mhm. Something that I share with my clients a lot that can create a bit of a like an aha moment is so if if you can't find more than 15 or 20 minutes, I mean, a day would be ideal, but a week, then what are you prioritizing over this time for you? And time for you, I'm not totally about the like prescriptive self-care things like you should meditate or you should do this, because should is just not, if you're shoulding yourself, then it's not feeling authentic.
Mhm.
um and so if you're prioritizing these other things, what can be delegated, what can be outsourced, what can be um left, what can just be like left to be as it is, for you to be able to get the I, some people might call it self-care, some people might call it alone time, but like how do you get that rhythm started so that you can actually get to the thing that you want to get to, which is often with the moms I work with, like alone time or alone time in the home, I think is much more challenging than alone time outside of the home. Um, and something really key in that is sometimes, I don't know if you find this with your clients too, but sometimes I find that we're actually having more conversations about what they need to do less instead of what they need to be doing more of.
100%. And I think a lot of that comes from the expectations that we put on ourselves, because we have social media, we have podcasts, we have so much access to so much good stuff. But
Mhm.
then we need to really cater it and curate it to what is going to light you up. What's going to make that 15 minutes of alone time that you have, or self care that you have, really like get our biggest bang for our buck. And we need to lower the expectations that we feel that other people are putting on us, and kind of
Mm.
go within and say, what is it that's my biggest priority? You know, if you like you brought up meditation, if we have 10 women, maybe only two of them, meditation will be like, oh, that was energizing. And now I'm ready to get back to my kids and, get right back into the day to day. I feel more regulated. I feel more myself. To another mom, maybe that's art. To another mom, maybe that's journaling. To another, it's scrolling her phone. We're
Yeah.
so individual, and I think we need to really step into that and say, okay, I need to know. I need to ask myself what is going to help me. And
Mm.
I love that you bring up doing less, because what's going to help everybody else, maybe everyone else that going to bed with a clean kitchen and staying up late to get that done, is going to feel really good to them. And maybe for you, it's not. So really dropping expectations and tuning
Mhm.
more into what is going to light you up, and have that alone time or that self-care time be precious and energizing for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think there's this perception out there that the only time to get that time is to either get up before my kids or stay awake after my kids. And for the people who that fits and that works, definitely not wanting to take that away from you if that works. But can we talk a little bit about like what if neither of those things work? How like where in the day do then we find that time?
Yeah. I love that you brought that up. And that's where we can add intention instead of time into your daily practice, into your mindset. And so, what my question would be to a woman I'm speaking to, or a mother, would be, how can we change the way you're doing things and make them feel more like self care? All right. So that
Mm,
is, maybe you still are going to choose to make dinner. And I love that you point out the word should is just garbage. We got to switch the language. We got to switch what we're requiring of ourselves. And so maybe you are choosing and you want to make dinner for your family.
mm,
How can we change that activity? How can we change our mindset around it to be to where that feels better for you? Maybe make a recipe that you truly enjoy instead of it's I
Yes.
have to cater to my kids or I have to cook maybe, whoever else is in the home what they like. Let's just shift and be like, okay, this week when we're planning your meals, what sounds amazing for you? Let's cook that for dinner. And so you see how we can just take the mundane tasks that maybe you're already doing and you're like, Kelly, Kayla, I cannot wake up earlier. I'm so exhausted. I want to go straight to bed. All right, let's just start with the things you're already doing. Let's just like tweak them a little bit to where
Hmm.
they feel better. Add some more intention, add some more self care in the way you think about yourself and the way you um, are behaving and how you're not behaving in the sense that we need to change it, but the intention you're bringing to it. That's where I
Hmm.
would start. Is what's already on your calendar. Now let's just bring some more intention to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I used to maybe I still follow them, but there was somebody who I follow who really talked about like habit stacking. And so how can you use those mundane moments in the day to, add in something else and not in the way of like multitasking or like this excessive productivity or hustle, but in a real like intentional way. And I find that when I'm like running the tub or my kids are in the tub, they're old enough now that it's not like a safety concern that I have to be in the room with them. I just like to be close by. And so I use that time to journal or fold laundry or whatever else might be needing my attention. Sometimes I scroll. I mean, let's be real. I'm not going to say that I don't. Um, but using those moments, like you said, like mealtime or bath time or the morning routine with your kids, whatever that looks like, to add in something that already kind of needs to be done. And maybe like two things could be paired at that one time.
Totally. And I think we need to give ourselves permission that that's okay. Our attention doesn't need to be 100% always on the kids, but I think it's good for kids. It's good. I tell my kids all the time, bored is not a problem. If you're bored, that's not a problem, right? I can play with you. Maybe I'm journaling at the table while you're playing
Yeah.
and giving ourselves permission to, I would even say like, let's back up of when did we get into the culture of like mom self-care, mom taking care of herself can only be done in the early hours or late evening? What if all day can be where we're loving and taking care of everyone in the family,
Yes.
right? Like it's
Yes.
not these big moments. And I think that's the most important thing is it's not, and I love that you brought up like this hustle culture of extreme productivity. I'm a productivity coach and we work on slowing down and being more intentional, right? Like slow productivity is going to be what feels better. It doesn't mean we're not getting anything done. It means we plan out. We say, okay, this week we have all week long. What are the priorities? Let's put that on our calendar, and then you can actually slow down and have more energy because you're not thinking of all the huge laundry list of to dos, right? But
Yeah.
my time is purposeful. Right now, I'm doing bath time for the kids. That's it. Or maybe other times I'm doing bath time and I'm going to journal. All my kids are in the
Hmm.
bath, right? So I think the more we can plan out in advance, then we can give ourselves permission to, oh, I know what I'm supposed to be doing and I'm just enjoying bath time right now. Or
Hmm.
now's the time where I'm going to journal as well and fold the laundry. And that's going to be self care to me because then I don't have all the laundry later on to look at.
Yeah.
So really planning ahead and give ourselves permission to, like you said, adapt, be flexible. It doesn't have to be the same thing every time, but just week to week, day to day, what are the priorities? And let's put those first.
Hmm. Hmm. What are some of the most common ways that your clients talk about overwhelm? Like, do they actually say, I'm overwhelmed, or does it come out in like other phrases or other ways?
Great question. If I reflect, I think anxiety is, I don't feel like overwhelm is always the vocabulary word, but maybe
Right.
anxiety, maybe it's too
Yeah.
much. There's too much to do. There's too much, right? It's this feeling of like there's so much going on, and I'm really not specific. I feel like overwhelm lives in the vague, where it's just too much, and I think that's why it's helpful to talk to someone about where we can really dive into like what's too much. What
Hmm.
about this feels overwhelming to you, because I think overwhelm just lives in the vague. And that's why I think overwhelm is pretty dangerous, because it just expands and expands. We don't really know the source. We don't know the cause. We don't know why. We don't know the next step. But if we can kind of bring it all in and say, what can you do this week instead of right now? Like, what can you do this week that feels like one step
Mm.
to minimize how much is happening? I
Yeah.
think another term is like, I can't do it all, or there's so much expected of me.
Mm. Mhm.
And like you said, that's where we work on, we actually can do a lot less. Doing less, we're gonna feel better. It's gonna be hard, especially if you are a self-proclaimed perfectionist, or you know, have fear of delegating, or you're telling yourself you can't delegate. But
Mhm.
giving yourself
Mhm.
permission to, things don't need to be done perfectly. I'm a big believer in the B minus attitude. You know, if the laundry's done at B
Yes.
minus, if the house is B minus, if my routines, right? If my routines are at a B minus, I'm doing great. So I think giving ourselves
That's
permission to not be
amazing.
perfect.
It's amazing. I think the type A overachiever in me is like, I'm gonna take that with me of like the the B minus attitude. That is an incredible mindset shift around like let it be good enough. Or um there was a Mel Robbins podcast that I listened to, and it was all about just like letting the purpose of it was like letting other people do their thing. And like she was talking about the circle of responsibility around like just let them, like if your parents, your aunt and uncle, your friend, your coworker, whatever is like doing something, it's not actually yours. It's not your pain, or it's not your story, or it's not your thing. Just like let them. And I think within all of that, when we think about overwhelm and living in the vague, like what does that actually mean? I classify overwhelm kind of in the same category as guilt, where it's actually what's called a meta emotion. It's how we feel about the feeling, right? And so
Mhm.
guilt isn't actually the feeling. There's a feeling under that. And so I feel like overwhelm is kind of in that same category of like overwhelm is the way we feel about a thing or another feeling. Like maybe we feel overwhelmed because we're so angry at our partner for not participating. Maybe we feel overwhelmed because we feel sad about our kids growing up. And so we're putting all this pressure on ourselves to like be present and, be at
Mhm.
every basketball practice or every music lesson. We're the only person who can drop off and pick up and, all of that. And so the overwhelm is actually not the root, right? The overwhelm is like the presentation, is the way we talk about it, but really there's so much underneath that around your emotions and your like nervous system state.
I love that. And as you speak, I just think you articulated that so well. As you were speaking, it reminded me of a Brene Brown quote that now I'm going to butcher, but she talks about how overwhelmed, it's almost like you're feeling your emotions at a 10, you're paying attention to them at, I don't know, she says like a 5, and then you understand them at like a 2,
Yeah.
right? Where I love that concept that you brought up of like a meta emotion, where it it almost gets all of our attention there, but that's not what actually the problem. Like
Hmm.
mom guilt, huge buzzword, right? We talk about, we hear about it all the
Yes.
time,
All the
but that's
time.
not the actual problem. Like we got to dig a
Mhm.
little deeper. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah. And the practice of feeling our feelings, I think can also feel kind of prescriptive, right? Like I
Mhm.
have had so many moms tell me, I don't have time to feel my feelings, right? And my heart just breaks because we are paying attention to our feelings all
Yeah.
of the time. It's so the time that it takes to feel the feelings. I mean, yes, for some people, it needs to be a practice. It needs to be something that they actively participate in. But I think for most humans, our just like baseline state is we are paying attention to our feelings. We just might be ignoring them or numbing
Mhm.
them or actually like mislabeling them. And that's also something that Brene Brown talks about in her book Atlas of the Heart and her series on, I want to say it's on Crave, um, around how we mislabel emotions, and when we
Mhm.
mislabel them, it actually can um, have more intensity or less intensity based on like just how we name them, right? Like, is
Yes.
overwhelm stress, or is overwhelm anxiety, or is overwhelm fear? Is overwhelm like a distress state in the body? And so there's a lot of, emotional vocabulary that also comes with the skills of emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, and the way that we view overwhelm or productivity or guilt or
Yes.
all of that.
I could not agree more. And even the thought that comes to my mind is we can't afford not to make the time to feel our emotions, right?
Mhm.
And mislabeling it, one of the biggest things, right, that I work with is moms who say, I don't have time. I can't, I don't have time. And that is a thought, right? Thoughts are not facts. You thinking and feeling that you don't have time, you probably believe it, right? But I promise you, we look at this month, what can we do? Or this quarter, right? This
Mhm.
year, how can we show up for you? I think we gotta switch the narrative a little bit. We gotta pay attention to what emotions we're telling ourselves we're feeling, labeling them accurately, but also like our narrative around time.
Mhm.
Let's start getting a little more specific. What time do you have today? Maybe it's 5 minutes. Let's own those 5 minutes that you have. What do you want to create with those 5 minutes? What do you want to think about when you just sit and be still for 5 full minutes? So being really honest with ourselves, what are we feeling and what time do we actually have? Sometimes it can feel good to feel like we don't have time, almost as if it's like a badge of honor that we're so busy, we're doing so much.
Right? Yeah.
But what if we gave ourselves permission to be like so proud of ourselves for having tons of time? Like, does that feel scary to you when you hear it? Like, what if people know I have time? Like, oh no, does it mean I'm not doing
Oh, right? And I immediately imagine like a group of moms at like a mom's group postpartum or like school pickup. And if you're the mom who doesn't say that you're like overwhelmed and stressed and busy, and
Yes.
like you don't have something to kind of like bitch about, then it's
Mhm.
it's almost like it is this like social pressure. Because if you're that mom, what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to
Right.
be outside of the hustle circle? Or the what does it mean if like I run moms groups for postpartum women, and if you're not the mom complaining about how little your partner does, what are you contributing to the conversation? What are you bringing? And I think there's real fear in that. Like, there's real fear in belonging and
Mhm.
acceptance, and we all have some kind of story around fitting in with groups of women. We've probably all been like wounded or hurt or in some kind of pain cycle with other women, and so there can be like this almost identity shift, or I don't want to use the word crisis, but like it's
Mhm.
almost like, well, what would I have to contribute if I wasn't participating in the overwhelm, in the
Right.
run of the mill anxiety or burnout? Like, what would that mean about me?
Mhm. I love that. I almost want to say, like, what a great journal prompt if that thought is resonating with you of like, what would I miss out on? What would I be risking on maybe one half of the
Mm,
page, but then like, what could I be gaining? Like, what could I gain if I really just buried that story and say, let's have a new story, a new narrative that my time is my own. I do have
mm.
enough time for what really matters for me. But what's the risk there, right? That fear, let that all come out, but then also looking at what could I possibly gain if I did step into that story.
Oh, yes. That is so, yes, that is so powerful. And I'm actually going to do that, because I think even as I was saying that, there was a part of me that was like, well, what would I talk about? You know, like,
Right,
you know, I
right.
think it's like, what would I say? How would I contribute to a conversation if I was with friends and, they were all in that state, and we're
Mhm.
all allowed to vent. I'm not saying that you can't take those
Yes.
things, to
We
your
need
group of
it.
friends. We need it. Um, But also I think there's like, there is a bit of a, like a narrative or a bit of a like, but if I let that go,
Mhm.
what then, and I think what happens for a lot of my clients when we get to this state of like, okay, so I can prioritize myself, right? Like I'm working on that mindset, and I'm there. I think a lot of what happens is, okay, well, what do I do now? Like,
Mhm.
if I let my kids be bored, if I'm not present with them at all times, if my partner takes them to basketball or whatever, then what do I do? What is my purpose? Who am I? And then it gets like, it can get kind of like dark and twisty down in there, because it's like
Yeah.
I don't know how to exist without being on, without being mom, without negotiating about the color of plate that they're going to eat off of, right?
It
Like, and
Yes.
so,
It's like when we hold our value in what we're doing or not doing, but if we can separate that and say, "No, I'm a valuable person. I am worthy. I am loved."
mhm,
Whether I'm doing stuff all right, I talk a lot about checking things off your to-do list feels great. But on the days where we have everything checked off and the days where we got nothing, our value doesn't change. And I think that's where you
mhm,
get us when it's like, oh, if I'm just staying home, who am I?
yeah,
And that's a scary, I think all growth is scary. It's a scary spot to sit in, like, well, who am I now? I've been mom for so long and now I'm trying to find me again, right? But sitting in that allowing space to kind of feel the fear, be the mom who's in the group and doesn't feel as overwhelmed as maybe she once was, or
mhm,
is carving out time for herself, then we can begin growing and building. And we'll just trust in the process. We'll figure that out later. But can we carve out the time now to just sit in the boredom of, I don't know what I like to do for self care. I don't know what my hobbies are. Let's find out. But first, we got to make the time to sit there in the, like you said, that space of like, now what?
now
Who
what?
am I now?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So, Kelly, tell us a little bit more about your work with women. Where can people find you? Who is your favorite kind of like ideal client? If people are listening right now and they're like, "Oh man, I need more of this in my life."
Yes. So you can find me at www.kellieforsyth. Forsyth is spelled Forsyth. I'm sure you can link it for me because it's still very unique. Give it kellieforsyth.com/coaching. You can also find there an application to work with me, more information of who I work with, as well as a free mini course that's going to take you, your 2 days to, I say 2 days, but it's 15 minutes each day, right? Don't freak out. To really help you in that feeling of, I have no time, I have so much to do. And that is the women that I work with, women who just say, I have no time and I feel like I need to be doing everything. And you're maybe a working mom. I work with a lot of moms in the medical field just because routines, and if you're working long shifts or night shifts, that's who I work with, is moms who want more routine in their day, want to do less of the things that don't matter and more of the things that do matter to them.
So, thank you so much for being here with us. I will link everything in the show notes where you can find Kelly. And if anything resonated with you from today's conversation, I would love it if you could give us a star or a review on the Chill Like a Mother podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.